Hey everyone, it's like 6:57 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 10th, 2022 years from something. I think I'm going to have to come up with like a real short, maybe not a tagline, like a short preamble for literally every video, something that takes like 20, 30 seconds. Just that a lot of people that are, they'll end up on one of these videos, they have no idea the history of the work I've been doing for years and what's even led me to here. So they're not even sure why the thought process is there. And I think a lot of people come in contact with this work mostly through alt history sources, Facebook groups, places like, maybe forums, I should say forums, like Stolen History, things like that. And, unfortunately, because there is now a new alt narrative in place, this Tartaria Mudflood Reset narrative, and that doesn't, in my point of view, I'm not negating any of those things, I suppose, as a pure specific topic in and of itself. What I'm saying is those three things, whether they've been known to happen or not, or whether there may be evidence of those things in the way that the Mockingbird alt narrative has been pushing it for a long time, it has evolved into something that's just shit. Which, by the way, okay, warning, strong language may be ahead. If you're a snowflake and you put far more value into saying words that are not naughty than you do into following the truth and facts wherever they lead, no matter how difficult they may be. When you encounter them, I'm not for you. Something I think that's important, I'm going to continue actually on this theme of rivers because I've been looking at rivers for a long time. Locally, in fact, I'm going to go to some structures near me later today, and I should be taking photos and videos while I'm there, and I'll be showing them. So I'm going to be continuing with that a little bit because I stumbled onto something thinking about the town I grew up in. And as I've repeated many times, which you got to figure most people out there are not going to tell you their real name, the town where they grew up, all of these things. They're not going to tell you. You can absolutely look into me. You can probably do searches in for the Valparaiso newspapers. You had the Valparaiso had the Times and the Post-Tribune, and you can probably find probably all of my arrests under my name that I have gone through in the past. And most don't do this. You got to figure why. There's a lot of excuses, but they don't add up. Because look, the people who are really dangerous, they can find you like that. So I call bullshit. Anyways, I was starting to think about some of these weird things that I have discovered regarding my old hometown where I grew up. I spent the first 22 years or so in this town of my life. I was born south of this town in another county, the first county south of here, actually, which was Jasper County. I'm going to be pulling back here from that. I really try to not use the term pulling out, but Rensselaer. So Rensselaer is online in miles as the crow flies from Couts. That's 26 miles. Grew up from the time I was about a year and a half until I was 22 in Couts. The first 10 to 11 years of which were along a little creek that I thought was a very insignificant creek called Crooked Creek. And this barren patch of land that you see all distressed here, and said this is actually where our house was. If I zoom in on it, actually, you see this right here. There's a little bit of paving. That was the drive. It was the drive. Now the farmer just uses that to drive right into the field. But yeah, there it was. And we had when we first moved in there was actually one of those big steel riveted trestle bridges. And a big one right here. Makes you wonder why this small little so-called creek needed such a major, strong trestle bridge like that over it. Something that can really hold a lot of weight. And I think that is very worth looking into. But I had somebody comment on an old, well, actually it was the video from probably yesterday, Adam Lowe, concerning he said that the Wabash Erie Canal. Now, I'm going to look into that because it's Indiana, and I think there's a lot more to Indiana than maybe people think. But today I'm going to look at Couts and some of the so-called rivers and what used to be rivers and what they are now and what the official story is. And again, a lot of this has to really just be noticing facts, noticing what's there, and taking into account what the official story is. Does it line up? And once we get that far and can really nail some things down, because a lot of these videos, they're not nailing something down. Hopefully this will lead to some research that nails things down a little better. And then hopefully we won't stop there. Again, one of the first signs that I see of somebody being a shill is that they have a very well-rounded, well-formed narrative almost right out of the gate. I can't believe more people don't see that as a real problem. Now, just I think yesterday, a user at stolenhistory.net, or whatever we would call it, participant, is one of the administrators, commented on a thread where I posted the PDF of bringing it all together as well as a video link. A terrific presentation on your very useful research. This is the kind of new information that will rejuvenate discussion on these topics. And that's the point. Groups like, whatever, supposed alt history groups, Facebook groups, forums, things like that, that do not allow serious questioning of narratives that they appear to be pushing. These people don't care about reality. They don't care about truth. They don't care about facts. They care about an agenda just as much as the people running Hollywood or the publishing business care about an agenda. Okay? And that should be a bad sign too. But unfortunately, I don't know if this is actually most people are falling for it, or the fact that we have a literal army of trolls, sock accounts, bots out there. You start looking through the comment section of these, maybe more in my opinion than a lot of people's. Controlled opposition and shills, and you see these same bogus looking fandom sort of comments over and over again, and all they exist there to reinforce a sort of point of view for, let's say, comes there who's an actual real person, and they're looking into these things, and they see all these comments. They see 200, 300, 3,000 comments, and they keep saying, "Oh my God, I was so confused until I found your channel, and it's the most enlightening thing, and I'm so happy now, and everything's good again. And they literally say comments that ridiculous over and over again. Now, if people made comments like that on my channel, they're peppered in here and there. And, you know, I take them with a grain of salt. Sometimes somebody's actually very excited to find the research I do, and I can understand that. Sometimes I'm very excited to find certain things. I was once far more excited to find new things years ago until I realized those new things I was finding, they were just another level of control. So I got less and less excited. Anyways. It's always a good thing to be willing to have others call you stupid. That's in my opinion, that's a great strength. To be willing to let others accuse you of being an idiot. Because that's the only way that you're really going to find anything out that you didn't know before, is making observations and asking questions that maybe somebody could come along and say, oh, you're such an idiot. How can you not know about that? Take like the wing dams that I noticed on the video 2 videos ago. What are in these rivers? Now, I found out the next day that those are called wing dams, but the thing is, the official story to what they are, what purpose they serve, and more specifically, who built them and when, is the part of it that all seems pretty weak. So it's okay. I'm actually good with people accusing me of being stupid or ignorant, because once you start asking these same people questions, take wing dam. You didn't know those were a wing dam, dummy? No, I actually did not. What are they? Well, go to Wikipedia, dummy. They'll tell you right there. They were installed to control the flow of the river, to make the channel deeper and swifter, and control sediment deposits. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Who built them? Well, the Army Corps of Engineers, of course. Huh. Did they build all of them? Well, I would imagine. Oh. Well, when? And that's usually when they're not sure. But if maybe they say, well, they built them in the early part of the 20th century. All of them? Well, I don't know. Oh. Well, do you know actually how many there are in all the rivers in let's just say the eastern portion of the United States? No. Well, do you know basically how big the structure of one single wing dam is? Let's just say in a river like the Missouri, which isn't even as big as the Mississippi, and they're all over the Mississippi. Do you know about how big one of those is? And they might, maybe. And you can tell them, well, the funny thing is, these things, one of them extends out into the river from the shore. Excuse me. About an average of 100, 200 feet on the the initial arm, and then once it crooks and goes into the other angle, it's usually, of course, these wing dams oftentimes 2 angles, sometimes just single angle, but most 2 angles, like a chevron. So the second arm of that chevron also goes out a couple 100 feet. And you have to figure, a river is typically going to get deeper towards the center. So you're going to have to actually use more material as you get further out. So you figure the average of wing dams, even in a river not as wide as the Mississippi River, like the Missouri, is going to be at least a few 100 feet. Now, those wing dams tend to oftentimes be about 20 feet wide. At their apex that's sitting out of the water. So how wide are they in the water? Because for them to maintain any kind of structural integrity, they have to go out like an ogee or a pyramid shape. How long do you suppose it would take actually to lay these out in the river there and get the materials in there that are good and compacted in a river that's flowing? And the Missouri is said to flow pretty hard, like 10-mile-an-hour currents. It's pretty good. How much work would you suppose it would take to get one of those in that wasn't going to be swept away by the river, that was literally compacted or solid enough, if these are supposed to be put in rocks, and if not, and at least a portion of them were poured in with concrete? How long do you suppose it would take to make cofferdams for each one of these and pour in a sufficient amount of concrete and then put fill in over top of that? Of course, then the people who called you an idiot, by that point, you either got them thinking or they don't want to talk anymore because they're the idiot. So it's a strength to have the willingness to just ask questions that you don't know about, in which somebody might accuse you of being an idiot. That's fine. That's fine. Now, this is the creek. So if our house was right here, like literally our house, I remember these drainage ditches too. There was this one right here, this one here. So the house was about right in here. There was a large barn, pretty large barn right here. And then the house would have been back over here. Now I said this was the drive. Now I'm getting a little weirded out. Maybe this was the, because there was an entrance, I believe, to the field that the farmer had over here. So I might have been wrong about that, but if that's the case, then they covered the drive. I remember the hill. I learned to ride my bike on this hill because this goes downhill from this bridge pretty good, like down to here. And then I'd turn in. I would get my bike going to try to work on balance. I'd turn in here and I'd usually hit our cedar beam fence or something and fuck myself up pretty bad. That was valuable experience. So let's just say that the house was about here. And then it's not clicking. Come on. All right, here's the creek. Why do I still have it in miles? Oh, about 100 feet. 100 feet or so. So, 30, 40 yards away from it. Pretty close. And there used to be, as you can see, the last picture's taken around 2020. There's only these tiny little bits and pieces of dotted trees. And we had total tree cover. I mean, from right here all the way up what they call Crooked Creek, which we're going to get to, all the way up to Route 49, which runs north and south, all the way up to Lake Michigan. You can see it as I pull back here. Route 49 is going to run straight through Couts, right up straight through Valpo, into Chesterton, and goes right to Lake Michigan, right to Dune State Park, the Chesterton branch of Dune State Park, Lake Michigan. So, anyways, Crooked Creek had, trees all along it. It was very lush. Provided way better cover in the harsh winters if the snow was like lake effect coming from this way. And there were times when we had a lot more trees over here too. I mean, look, we lived in an area where behind us there was just this gigantic area of fields. Look at this right here. That's 3/4 of a mile down to the next road. And then across it is over a mile across. So you got to figure, pretty close to a mile square of nothing but fields for the most part. And there's various little trees dotted in some of the lines where the irrigation ditches were. You'd get some hard snow if the wind was coming up from the south and the west. It would be really, really bad. So when it would be coming from the north, like lake effect, all these trees really helped a lot. And there were trees on both sides, and they actually kept this bank from eroding. Now, the weird thing about it, Crooked Creek, right now, take a measurement on it, you got about 30 feet. And really, that might not be too far off of what it was when I was a kid. I just don't remember too well. Because the thing is, there was always something like there would be a downed tree in it, or, you know, it wasn't really kept up that well when I lived there. But that might not be too far off. So anyways, this Crooked Creek, and the story is Crooked Creek runs through Porter County, and it actually rises up in northeast Porter County, near around Westville. Now, I'm not going to track the entirety of Crooked Creek, but what got my interest about Crooked Creek was this. This was the creek I spent the first 10 years of my life right next to. I'd swim in it, even though there were snakes and all manner of creek wildlife in there. I mean, we never got a leech on us. We never got a snake bite, you know. We were safe as can be. And we'd swam in there barefoot, you know, and it was muddy bottomed. We'd go in there barefoot, and we were kids, and we didn't have any fear. 'Cause that's how you are when you're a kid. Usually. So here's the strange thing. Now, Crooked Creek, I guess I'll use my my line path, and maybe that'll work good. I might change it back into miles just for kicks. We'll say Crooked Creek from where I lived, okay? I'm going to start there. Oh no, what just happened? I must have had a pre-existing line path or something. Let's clear them. Okay. What I found was really interesting. Now, Crooked Creek goes to and empties into the Kankakee River. The Kankakee River goes to and empties into what becomes the Illinois River. The Kankakee and the Des Plaines River both meet conveniently and create the Illinois River. If you sailed up the Illinois River into the Des Plaines River, that would take you up to and allow you to interact with or get on or off not only the Little Calumet River, I think maybe the Calumet River, and then the Chicago River, the South Fork of the Chicago River, which is nothing but canals, like admittedly canals. Why they even call it the Chicago River, I don't know, because they're freaking canals. I'm not even sure if the North Fork of the Chicago River is in a canal. Now, I'm going to have to pull back here a little bit as I do this, because check this out. This is a creek, right? This is a creek, right? 30-foot wide creek. And I've got a leg here that runs straight as a damn arrow for about 2 miles. And now I've got another leg straight as an arrow for another half mile. And that's where it dumps into the Kankakee River. Now, that's not what's so interesting. Now, you'll see if you look at all of this from above here that, yeah, you do have irrigation ditches, which for the most part, because of where the Crooked Creek is and all, you know, you've got that straight irrigation ditch there that's a little over a quarter mile long. And you might have small arms coming off them. In a case like this, I don't think they even named this one. There are names to a lot of these ditches. And they appear to be irrigation ditches. This one here is connected by a cylinder tube underneath the road. And this literally is just a ditch. It goes out and it feeds a couple of other very clear irrigation ditches. Another one right here just comes right off of that and goes out, and it's going to feed irrigation We've got one that comes right off of it right there, and it's connected to irrigation. So for the most part, yeah, we've got what, appear to be irrigation ditches. I'm going to have to go back to 5 feet. And you need irrigation ditches if you're not getting a certain amount of flooding. Now, this one is supposed to be about 23 feet wide. That's a pretty good size. It's a pretty good size. I'm not going to say that that's not exactly what it is, but we do have the remnants here of what appears to be it connecting to this thing they call a creek, which is pretty damn straight. And it's not just the leg from where my house was. Okay, if I pull back right here, and I go back to my line tool, or path, sorry, my path tool, and hit clear, I can start from where I once lived and show you the path it runs. And as you go along here, if you can see this pretty good, this is actually pretty remarkable. Maybe this is why they call it Crooked Creek, right? Because whatever this is, it does not meander. We've got a few spots where it looks like it's eroded, and maybe that's because in those spots it was actually falling a bit. We have it here, big, long, straight, huge straight sections of it, straight section, all the way up here to, are we near Westville now? Well, we're near Route 2. And I could just keep following it. Crooked Creek, it's still labeled. Crooked Creek. Crooked Creek. Now, for it to get as big as it was by my house, it's still being labeled Crooked Creek. Right to here. Where was it at? Crooked Creek. I could zoom in on it a little bit. Now, by here, it does appear to get in apparent disuse. Still rather large banks on it. Only about 11 feet wide. And it is narrowing, of course. Which is not a huge thing. We would probably expect that. Strangely, though, when we get about this far, then we're looking and we're going where the fuck did it go? Where did it go? See, the official story is that Crooked Creek rises in northeastern Porter County, and if I pull back here, you can see this is this Westville is up there to the right, Westville there, and that is, it's northeast Porter County, yeah. Here's one of my problems. I have been on and off studying hydrology, just the sense of like how rivers work, how rivers start, what kind of situations they start from. So a river will start from a number of situations. Either there has to be a water runoff. It doesn't really matter if we're talking about a mountain. It doesn't matter if it's coming up from a spring. It has to be coming up from a spring in high ground. If it's coming up from a spring in low ground, it's just going to form a lake or a pond. You have to get higher ground for the water to run. But you have to have something. You have to have a spring. You have to have a certain amount of runoff from high ground, mountain or other high ground. Even if it was a drainage plain, and it has to be higher and it has to go together, what's strange to me is that where is it? And I know this is the point where maybe some people could come along and go, why are you so stupid? Well, it forms from some magical shit. I don't know. Maybe these teeny tiny little creeks that are leading into it here, but how is that? The Crooked Creek, for most of the distance that it travels, is being tapped into for irrigation, one way or another. Where's water coming from? Where's the water coming from? If you have all these irrigation ditches, that's fine. There should be other creeks. These creeks should be coming from either a wet area, which is where you would have probably porous land, water's coming up. Now it's accumulating, it's finding a natural channel, and it's going. I'm not seeing that with Crooked Creek. It goes up to Westville, and at some point, it just starts looking more like itself as some kind of an irrigation ditch or a large arm of something that would be providing two irrigation ditches, depending. Where's its source? Where's it rising from? Where's that? What? Now, if you didn't think that was weird, because Crooked Creek is small, but I do think it is significant. I just find it interesting because it was right across the damn street from where I spent the first 10 years of my life. Okay? So part of it is like a nostalgic attachment, but that's not the whole thing. Now, if you look at where my cursor's going, all right, so this is what's supposed to be Crooked Creek down here. Now, if you read up on rivers and how rivers behave, these straight shots that you see, that's not a typical normal river behavior. Neither is what you see here. This is supposed to be the Kankakee River. Neither is what you see here in these huge, huge straight runs of the Kankakee River. Pretty big. I mean, yeah, I'm saying huge, but I mean, look at that. Look at that. That's 5 miles straight run. Straight run for 5 miles. It's pretty long. And wait till you see how long... Well, anyways. Now, if you want to see how rivers behave, typically rivers behave, all you got to do is look at the signs on Google Earth of where the Kankakee used to be and where it used to run. We can see them all over here. The Kankakee was obviously a marvelous river. You can read up on it just on Wikipedia that it actually... Let me go there right now. The Kankakee River is a tributary of the Illinois River, approximately 133 miles long, in the central Corn Belt Plains of northwestern Indiana. I didn't know those were called central Corn Belt Plains, but there's a lot of corn there. And northeastern Illinois in the United States. At one time, the river drained one of the largest wetlands in North America, and furnished a significant portage between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River, significantly altered from its original channel. Yes, it has been. It flows through a primary rural farming region of reclaimed cropland south of Lake Michigan. And there's a lot of descriptions here. They'll tell you that those straight channels were dredged. There's sort of different stories. Now, let's kind of get here. I'm not going to go into their purported science of where it all came from, because it sounds like some super bullshit to me. Concerning moraines, and that it was actually formerly a lake basin, which they call that a yeah, I know, I can't remember, a lacustrine plain. Yeah, not so sure about that, actually. But it was really something when the Kankakee was running in its natural path. It created a huge wetland. Let me see if I can start after their BS about the lacustrine plains and all of that. Kankakee rises in northwest Indiana, approximately 5 miles southwest of South Bend, Indiana. And I'm hoping we'll get to that, because that's another one of those things like, where? Where? I'm here. Where? Where's it rising? Okay. I think it's a good question. Channelized course generally southwestward through rural northwestern Indiana, collecting the Yellow River from the south in Stark County. We'll look at that too. It's interesting. In passing the communities of South Center and English Lake, it forms the border between LaPorte, Porter, and Lake counties on the north, and Stark, Jasper, and Newton counties on the south. The river curves westward and ceases to be channelized as it enters Kankakee County in northeastern Illinois. Wait till you see that. It's crazy. Stops being channelized. Approximately, which, by the way, a lot of information on Kankakee will tell you, well, Kankakee in Indiana is a mud bottom river, and then once it gets into Illinois, it's rock bottom, which is funny, because maybe if they would have left it alone, it would have been the same in Indiana. It receives the Iroquois, right, in Illinois. So it says it drains 2,989 square miles in northwest Indiana, 2,169 square miles in northeast Illinois, and about 7 square miles in southwest lower Michigan. Yeah. Imagine that. The Kankakee River heads near South Bend, then flows westward into Illinois, where it joins with the Des Plaines River. Here's part of what I want to know is when they say things like drains, they must be talking about essentially runoff of water to lower ground via wetlands, via some sort of drainage plane that's higher in elevation, that finds a channel, that channel of water seeks lower elevation, and eventually it gets to the sea level, right? You'd hope. But like in the case of Crooked Creek, what the fuck is it draining? What was interesting now is they say that before they dug those straight channels, the Kankakee was actually one of these knotted sort of rivers. I mean, way beyond meandering, very knotted rivers. And when it would flood, they would say that it would essentially create a sort of river, a flood plain, 2 to 4 miles across, which was about 1 to 4 feet deep. Is big. And, you know, I remember even with that straight channel and the flooding of all of the fields around the Kankakee, you'd be driving on 49, which was raised high up above the fields. I guess it had to be. You'd be driving 49 and you'd look at off all of these fields on either side of the road, and you would think that you were in the middle of a huge lake or something, because there would still be that much water. Makes you wonder why they needed all the irrigation ditches. I mean, there's so much water oftentimes it would flood a lot of those fields. But it was not a weird thing. It was pretty normal. Maybe the ditches, you know, were just so that they could, you know, pump off them in the drier seasons, you know. So let's just end the Grand Kankakee Marsh. I want to get to the dates real quick when they say they did stuff, and the history of here I am. So they say the history, Kankakee Torrent, so the Kankakee River was originally formed around 16,000 years ago. Yeah, okay. by an event known as the Kankakee Torrent. Like they were there. This is where they get into the glacial lake, resulting from meltwater from the Wisconsin glaciation, breached the moraines, located in what today is northern Indiana, holding it in. The resultant flood created bed of Kankakee River and greater impact. So, if that's what created it, well, they're saying that this gigantic amount of water just spilled into this gigantic area that was being held in. It's all glaciation. You know, it's like with space. Anytime they've got a problem, they just throw an asteroid at it. I guess the same thing works with topography and geology. Anytime they've got a problem, all they got to do is throw a fucking glacier at it. Problem solved. Glacier, man. Yeah, glacier cut that. Oh, melted glacier formed that. Glaciers. So they say the Grand Kankakee Marsh, up through the early 19th century, the river furnished an important water transportation route through the Illinois County for both Native Americans and European settlers. Who were the Native Americans? That they were white as me. Notably, the French fur trappers, the headwaters of the river near present-day South Bend, allowed a portage to the St. Joseph River, which drains into Lake Michigan. Okay, let's go here. Until the end of the 19th century, that's the 1800s, folks. And I hate the way that they say it like that. I really do. I hate that. 20th century is the 19-something-something. Just, I know why they say it. Don't go in the comments and tell me why they say it that way. I get it. I just think maybe there's a better way of saying it. Until the end of the 1800s, the river was nearly 240 miles long, flowing in a highly meandering course through a vast complex of wetlands surrounding the river, and must have been beautiful. That was known as the Grand Kankakee Marsh, encompassing 5,300 square miles. It was one of the largest marsh wetlands in the United States. Okay. What I want to get to is this whole thing with, however, when the two counties were originally proposed, today the Kankakee essentially forms the county line between LaPorte and Stark counties. This is more east of where I grew up, okay? However, when the two counties were originally proposed, Stark County's borders were such that the river divided the county and effectively isolated the northwest portion. Aww. In order to reach the rest of the county, it was necessary for residents to swim their ass across the river. It didn't say that. In this area, to travel some distance east to Lemon's Bridge before making the journey south. Bummer. These residents petitioned the state to be annexed by LaPorte County, and this was done January 28th, 1842. That's what you do with history, too. In the United States especially. Okay, so just like asteroids in space and glaciers on land, when you have a problem of origin concerning the nonsense that they try to tell us about the infrastructure and the greatness of this country, this land, this continent, North America, they just throw the 19th century at it. When did this happen? 1800s. No kidding. When were all these great things built? 1800s. Well, either the 1800s or the early 1900s, you know, when most of the nation was off being killed in the wars. Yeah, then. That's when we did it. Yeah. But for the most part, so you'll get a little bit of fringe tailing off there in the 1900s, a little bit tailing off there before in the 1700s, but for the most part, whenever they got an origin problem, they just throw the 1800s at it. Doesn't matter what it is. Hey, when were all these 850,000 miles of railroad tracks in the United States, when were all those built? 1800s. Whoa. When were all of these crazy structures that we find all in the rivers and stuff, when were like all these wing dams and the locks and dams and stuff, when were all those built? 1800s. Whoa. When were all these amazing world fairs that had technology and buildings and stuff like we've never seen in our life, which of course we all know were just made out of plaster. When were all those held? 1800s, early 1900s, when we were all off fighting the biggest wars ever. Yeah, somewhere in between there. So what they say is, and I can't find, I'm trying to find it. They say like these, some really rich people from Lake County, Indiana. So Lake County, Indiana is the furthest north and furthest west county in Indiana. So there's all these rich guys from Lake County, Indiana. They decided to finance the straightening out of the Kankakee over all of this farmland they owned. So, we're talking about a couple robber barons that owned that much farmland in Lake County that they comprised the great majority of landowners. So they must have been good guys, those guys, I would imagine. And then it basically kind of gets more, let's say less and less specific concerning how it was paid for in Porter County, how it was paid for in Stark County. Let's just say draining the river beginning in the mid-19th century. That's the 1800s, y'all. Much of the basin of the wetlands was drained to create cultivated cropland. 2 large ditches were constructed in 1858 as part of the Swamp Act. That's Act, A-C-T, not A-S-S. The Swamp Act of 1852, the first attempt to drain the marsh. Unfortunately, they don't have one of those little blue linkies on the Swamp Act of 1852, so we can read all about it in detail. The first attempt to drain the marsh, a lobby grew among the large landholders in Lake County, which I know I just went over this, but I didn't know that I would find it this easily, who advocated the complete drainage of the marsh. But due to the American Civil War, which happened in the 1800s, and the subsequent economic downturn, little action occurred until the 1880s, just when the Midwest was gearing up for the biggest World's Fair ever. We're going to start this gigantic project, which was nowhere near as big as the canals and locks and dam systems on the Illinois rivers and the Chicago River, but we'll get to that. In 1884, meetings were held by landowners in South Bend to discuss the drainage of the marsh. So that's St. Joe County. Because you got, it goes like this. I'll try to do it with my hand here. St. Joe, LaPorte, Porter, Lake, and then Illinois state line. And those are all the northern 4 counties. That's mostly because that's the county. The Kankakee basically represents the county line for 3 of those counties, and they say it rises in St. Joe, the 4th one over. Okay. Now I lost my place. God, I'm a loser. In 1884, meetings were held by landowners in South Bend to discuss the drainage of the marsh. 2 of the largest landholders agreed to build a network of drainage ditches in their land to begin draining the eastern edge of the marsh. State funding was granted to the project during the term of Indiana Governor Claude Matthews. Looks like a dickhead. And the project was expanded to include the entire marsh. At the time, it was heralded as a great advance for the state, which was also in the process of draining the Great Black Swamp. Sounds racist. By 1910, most of the marshlands were drained, and work on rerouting the Kankakee River began in 1917, right in time for World War I, the war to end all wars. Let's get some projects done, because we've got young men to spare. The river was dredged to make it significantly deeper. By 1922, the process was mostly completed, and the river was several miles shorter than its original course. The upper river was also channelized levees to allow easier transport, cut timber from the wetlands to sawmills downstream in Illinois. Yeah, we did. We had a lot of trees here in Indiana. We still do. Fucking Michigan people, man. They all make fun of our trees. We got plenty of trees. We had plenty of trees. Maybe they cut a bunch down. I don't know. You guys don't got the Kankakee marshlands. We had those till those 2 jagoffs in St. Joe County decided to finance something. You just, my ass. All right, look, I'm gonna take you on a strange journey. I'm starting at Kankakee, right near 49, so this is pretty close to my house. The Kankakee River, what they call the river. This is just the channel. You can see remnants of the old river all over in the landscape. I still got the damn thing in miles. Sorry, feet. You know, Kankakee, you know, right here, 160 feet. It's a good-sized channel. That's a good-sized channel, folks. That is a good-sized channel. There aren't too many parts of the Kankakee that, and please pay attention. I'm sorry. As I scroll, I'm not going to scroll super fast because I do want you to pay attention to all of these areas you're going to see. All of these areas with all of the lush greenery. And a lot of them are actually channels. They're almost like little gullies. I used to actually go and camp, fish around these little channels. Sometimes they would have water, sometimes they would not have water. Still left, like you can see, like this right here. It would still be somewhat of a channel right here. Sometimes it would be filled, sometimes it would just dry up over time, you know. But it makes you think, I mean, that had to be a really long time that it had sat there now dry. For it to be as it is now, it's not even any kind of a gully channel sort of a thing there, you know. Some spots there's still water, almost like standing water, though it does connect oftentimes with what are supposed to be ditches, drainage and irrigation ditches, I guess. It's a wide channel. I just showed you, let's say average 150. You'll see it all over here. And you'll see all of the green from it. Can't do anything about all of these plowed fields in the photos. Very straight. Very straight. And as you saw with the one measure of run that I did on the Kankakee, there are these paths. Going to have to go back to miles. There are parts of the path that run in a perfectly straight line for many miles. Perfectly straight line, many miles. An average of 150 feet wide. I'm still following this thing. Still nice straight paths. Look at that. Nice and straight, nice and straight, nice and straight, nice and straight. And here we're going to get into something so interesting. Nice and straight through Lowell, Indiana. Nice and straight. Holy shit, what just happened here? What is this white line? That's the state line. That's the state line between Indiana and Illinois. And this one I can't figure for the life of me. This one's really interesting. Right here you'll see those braided, they're really pronounced right here. These braided patterns on both sides of the Kankakee, the wetlands and stuff. Must have been really something. Really something. And I'm not, in all of this, I'm not trying to somehow like bitch out and put man down or something by controlling the river. Not at all. Not at all. There are better times and places for the river to be out of control, and sometimes there's not. And maybe the river was controlled a lot better a few hundred years ago, and then a lot of the people in this area of southern LaPorte, Porter, and Lake County were carried away, and not as many people were there, and so the river just started breaking some of the bounds that had existed for it, and they just had to tidy things up again. That I could believe happening in those years. But if you want me to believe, so all of a sudden in Illinois, it just nothing anymore. Boom! And you can say that that's for whatever reason you want to. I don't care. That's fine. But that nice big straight wide channel, nothing. Once you hit Illinois, it's a river. It behaves like a river. Look at that. That's how a river behaves. Crooked Creek doesn't look nothing like that because that's a river. Crooked Creek's not a river. Crooked Creek is a canal. Just like the Kankakee, so-called river, is a canal. It's not a river anymore. So the Kankakee runs in Indiana. What is it? I mean, look. The Illinois state line, if I just went to line and I kept it in miles, that's Kankakee, Illinois, is Kankakee state line. I'm just going to go as the crow flies up here. As the crow flies, 70 miles. When you consider all of its meandering, well over 100 miles. And they dug a channel about 150 feet wide for well over 100 miles. In what years? Who did that? And they paid for it how? Because there were a lot more channels run than that. Don't tell me that you think Crooked Creek doesn't look like an absolute channel. It's got an average of 30 feet wide. Sometimes it's wider, but about 30 feet all the way till it dives into the Kankakee. Now here's something, when they said that it swallows up the Yellow River, you get here to the confluence of the Kankakee and the Yellow River. Here it is. Nice, straight, even channels. Look at that. Right into it. Look at this. 2 channels. How far apart are they? Let's see. 2 channels about 175 feet apart. Each one of these channels somewhere around, I'm in miles, son of a bitch. Get this again. 150 feet apart. Okay. And each channel 50 to 60 feet wide. That's supposedly the Yellow River right there. Dives into the Kankakee there. And then they have various levees along here to control all of the flow of all of this. The yellow continues like that all the way up, and now it follows this huge straight course for countless miles, and you start wondering, well, who dredged all of that? Because that's no small, tiny little river. Who paid for that? To be all laid out in perfectly straight lines for 5-10 miles at a time, and then to be dredged 150 feet wide, or in its case, maybe 100 feet or 75 freaking feet wide. Who paid for all that? When was it done again? This doesn't get done effortlessly. And the strangest thing is, I want to make sure I'm near South Bend. If you follow the Kankakee all the way up, and here it is, right here on my screen, it just said Kankakee. You keep following it up and keep following it up and then zoom in on it. It's just the Kankakee. It's just the Kankakee, what they're calling the Kankakee River. And I don't even see any more signs of all of that meandering anymore once we get up here. Right? It's said to rise southwest of South Bend. I should be seeing these huge wetlands. Something. But when we get up this far, all of a sudden they give it another name. Honest to God, I'm telling you, it's a Kankakee. You're following up that channel. They give it another name, and before you know it, it dead ends just like the Crooked Creek did. And the problem is, where exactly does the Kankakee rise? I mean, if I were to guess, just being an idiot, I would say, well, I don't know, there are these really significant wetlands right down here near English Lake, and above that, around Route 39. We do have some meandering as we go up. Here. You see some meandering around that. So, you know, you can still kind of get, okay, looking good. And then all of a sudden, it's right around Road 104, a little bit north of that. It stops. You don't see the signs of meandering anymore. All the way up to South Bend, it's supposed to rise here southwest of South Bend. And, you know, I'm not sure if that little small body of water is a massive spring and why it's not connected directly to this channel. But I do have some problems in the sense that I want to know, which we have more meander here, so it'd have to be further beyond that. I'd like to know where it is exactly this is rising. What's exactly feeding it, because I'm having problems finding that. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Just a small thing on the Kankakee, and I do want to look into that that Wabash Erie Canal. seriously. And like I said, I'm going out to some locations today, and I hope I get some like film and pictures. They're locations of hydros, low heads, and other things. So I will see you all probably pretty soon. Take it easy.